Just join us, make sure you mute yourself, please. Everyone's unmuted, so just a quick, actually, housekeeping reminder that I'll repeat. If you pop in, mute yourself or turn your video off, because both are allowed for you to be informal and chat with us if you've got questions. But just be mindful about that if you're not speaking. And then here's how we got here. This is not a for or against around rescheduling. There are definitely forums for that and opportunities for that. We've got a fast hour to share information for the cannabis business owner. Today's state legal cannabis business owner who is going to see their business change fundamentally if this goes forward. And we are at such a point in the timeline, and you're going to hear about the timeline. Let's move on to the agenda. Where you're going to hear what has happened so far and what's going to happen. And we're at a point in the timeline where this is beginning to look very likely. And so it's a good moment to answer your questions really fast around what will you need to do differently and when might that happen for the cannabis business owner once or if Schedule 3 does happen. So, and I'm on the side of it's going to happen. People are still making their bets, but I think that it's happening. So you will hear me say that. All right, so you're going to hear about rescheduling defined from Andrew Klein. We have Andrew and Elizabeth here with us. They're going to come on together, and they are from Cannabis for Sensible Rescheduling. I don't know if I've got that acronym quite right, but this group is at the forefront of really, I would say, advocating for this to happen. So it's really just the best experts in the room for you. So that's very helpful. We've also got Wild on, their chief legal counsel, Gabe Partonley, who I'm a huge fan of because he tells things like it is. And he's also got the purview of looking at this from a lot of states, right? Wild's in a lot of states. So it's a really good point of view to share with you. And then Faith Anderson is here from New Projects. Many of you probably already know Faith, but as you know then, Faith is a resident expert on cannabis finance and accounting, having run finance and accounting at multiple cannabis businesses and all the verticals. So this is really an expert. She's going to share what's going to change for 280E, which is the bulk of the change for cannabis businesses. We're going to hear from MCBA, from Frederica Easley. And this, again, is an really great moment to bring you this because it's an important point in the timeline. So Frederica is going to share what's happening and how you can get engaged and what we should be thinking about as a community around this change and for our community around this change. And then we'll open it up for questions. So everyone's going to stick to time. We're going to be super fast. And I'm going to turn it over to Andrew Klein and Elizabeth Berry.
Thank you so much for having us. I think our acronym is the Coalition for Cannabis Scheduling Reform. I always get it confused also. There's so many acronyms running around in this industry. I'm Andrew Klein. I co-lead the cannabis practice at Perkins Coie. We're a 1,200 person law firm based in Seattle, but I work out of the Denver office. Prior to my time at Perkins Coie, I was a federal prosecutor and also worked for then Senator Biden and then VP Biden back in the day. I'm just going to start by backing way up, I guess, because I think there are a lot of people out there who get confused about why we're not descheduling in this process. There are two ways to reschedule, administratively or legislatively. And we're in an administrative process, not a legislative process. In this case, that administrative process was initiated by the President of the United States, and that is historic in and of itself. In the past, others have petitioned DEA to reschedule. Last time in 2016, it was some members of Congress, and that petition was rejected by FDA and DEA because they couldn't find that there was currently accepted medical use in treatment in the United States. But a lot has changed since 2016. The other way to reschedule or deschedule is for Congress to take action. And we all know how broken Congress is right now. So this administrative process is really the only path in 2024 from my perspective. And the distinction is important because there was never the possibility of descheduling during this administrative process. It just couldn't happen. That can only be done by Congress. And that's because if you go through this administrative scheduling route, FDA has to make a finding on abuse potential. It's one of the findings they need to make. And in order to deschedule, to take marijuana off the schedule entirely, they would have to find that marijuana has zero abuse potential. And that was just never going to happen because there is some abuse potential for marijuana. So Biden initiated this process in late 2022. I think it was September or October, and then we formed the coalition about a month later. So the question is, what will this do, right? So this will move marijuana to Schedule 3, as everyone knows. It recognizes that marijuana for the first time has medical value, and that's really significant. Basically, the administration looked at the 38 state medical markets for the first time. It used to be that unless you were an FDA-approved drug, that the government couldn't find that there was currently accepted medical use in the United States. And so for the first time in history, they've looked at this botanical and they've said, wow, there are doctors treating millions of patients at the state level in 38 states. There is medical value. And so that's a big deal. It also eliminates 280E, and I know others are going to talk about that, but I'll just add that in addition to eliminating 280E, it eliminates the prospect of prosecuting anyone for tax evasion for violating 280E. So that's a big deal. The fact is that it's still a Schedule 3 drug, so it's still illegal to traffic in a controlled substance unless you're pharma and you've gone through clinical trials and you've been approved by FDA. There'll be no interstate commerce allowed. There'll be no health claims allowed. There'll be no marketing to children allowed. The Federal Food and Drug Cosmetic Act will still apply. It doesn't change criminal penalties, but it also doesn't mean that big pharma is going to come in and suddenly disrupt our marketplace. If a big pharma company wants to spend $1 billion on clinical trials, more power to them. But we believe that the state regulated marketplace will remain as is. We also know that based on the OLC memo that was attached to the rule, that currently accepted medical use and treaties are no longer an obstacle to rescheduling, that the two-part test that HHS developed is lawful. It does give DEA some discretion here, and there could be some new DEA controls. That is an unknown that we're sort of working through. But the last thing I'll say is the battle lines have been drawn on abuse potential. I think that's pretty clear. Our opposition is going to come out and say that marijuana is addictive and dangerous, and we're going to have to prove otherwise. So I think that kind of sets the stage for us here.
Thank you, Andrew. So just to back us up and walk through the timeline, where we've been and how we've gotten to this point in time. So on October 6, 2022, President Biden initiated a process saying, HHS and the AG, I'd like you to expeditiously review the scheduling status of cannabis. And that put into movement a process that was handed to FDA, was handed to HHS to look for what Andrew described. So currently accepted medical use and the potential for abuse of cannabis. Within 11 months, so on August 29th, 2023, HHS released a historic recommendation saying that cannabis should be moved to Schedule 3. In the context of how quickly these types of reviews occur, this was very, very fast, and it was very, very thorough, and did rely on some of the things that Andrew mentioned, like being able to look to our licensed state markets as an example and as a data point in currently accepted medical use. So a big deal, right? First time in our in the history of cannabis prohibition in this country that a federal agency came out and said, yes, this has medicinal value. From there, about a year later, so a lot of steps were going on behind the scenes. That recommendation was handed off to DEA, and DEA initiated their process for reviewing these factors. There are 8 factors in the rescheduling of cannabis. During that period, for the first time, a president mentioned cannabis in the State of the Union. This was, again, a historic moment and really continuing to keep up the energy, the pressure, and the momentum behind rescheduling. In April of this year, the AP first reported, and then DEA released in May its recommendation to move cannabis to Schedule 3. So that's really taken us to this moment in time on May 21st. So just a few weeks ago, it's been a busy few weeks, but just a few weeks ago, the DEA published its proposed rule. And that's initiated this process that we're in today, and that Andrew's going to share a little bit more about, which is the public comment period and the aggregating of information that DEA will take into consideration, over the next period of months towards a final rule and final order.
Is that to me?
Yeah,
Okay.
that works.
Yeah, so as Elizabeth mentioned, we're in a 60-day public comment period that runs from May 21st to July 22nd, and it's super important to establish a record. And the reason it's important is that there may be an administrative law judge hearing. I'm somewhat dubious if that's actually going to happen, but if there is, the public record the public comment will serve as the record at an administrative law judge hearing. It will actually be the evidence that can be introduced in that hearing. And the same goes for litigation. This is an administrative process. And so normally when you file a lawsuit, you go to a district court and there's one judge and there's a jury. In this case, it's a direct appeal to a circuit court. So there'll be a 3-judge panel, and there'll be no fact finding by that court. All the facts will be laid out in that public comment period. That will be the record, and nothing else will be able to be introduced in terms of fact. So super important to get public comments in. With that said, it's most important to get helpful public comments in. The administration has received 2,000 comments already, and DEA doesn't have to incorporate those comments, but they have to consider them in drafting that final rule. And so the more comments that come in, the longer the process takes. And so it's not great for them to receive, comments that say, you should really deschedule because that's not going to be under consideration, or, you should really pass safe banking because that's not something that DEA can control. The public comments should really be focused on abuse potential and currently accepted medical use. So if there's a doctor that says, I've been treating patients in the state of Texas for 20 years and, for chronic pain, and half my patients are now off opioids and on, marijuana because I'm recommending that, and that's been really helpful. That's great information. Likewise, if you have an addiction specialist who wrote in and said, I see that there are 100,000 deaths from fentanyl last year, and 140,000 deaths from alcohol, and I've never seen a death attributed to marijuana. The abuse potential of marijuana is clearly far less than any drugs in Schedule 2. That would be super helpful. So while that public comment period is going on, that simultaneously there's an ALJ process that's happening. Normally, DEA says you have 30 days to file a petition, and it's published in the federal record. In this case, for whatever reason, they ask people to send by snail mail a petition. And so we have no idea. And their request, normally when a petition to have a hearing is filed, once DEA grants a hearing, there's an opportunity for people to petition to participate. That was hard. But in this case, they've done it all at once. They've said there's 30 days, period, to either request a hearing or request to participate in a hearing if one is granted. And so we don't want to ask for a hearing because we don't want to delay the process. But if someone else asks for a hearing, we want a seat at the table. And so we are working on a petition, which we're going to file next week, which will make some innovative standing arguments and get us a seat at the table should the prohibitionists seek a hearing. My best guess is that DOJ is probably not going to have a hearing. There's some litigation going on right now around the constitutionality of ALJ judges. My best guess is that it won't happen, but we're going to be ready if it does. After considering public comment and the evidence presented at that ALJ hearing, if there's an ALJ hearing, the administrator will publish a final rule in the Federal Register. Once that rule is published, there'll be 30 days for aggrieved parties to file a direct appeal in the Court of Appeals. And that can be in the DC circuit or in the circuit in the principal place of business of the petitioner. So it'll be interesting to see who sues, what state they're suing from, and where the litigation ends up happening. My best guess is that we will see someone suing.
Okay.
Gabe, I think you're up next.
Am I up next?
You,
Great.
Yeah.
you
Well,
are.
great.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. I muted you when I meant to unmute myself, but Gabe, I'm flipping to your slide. Andrew, though, before I go, I wanted to ask you a question. So you're gonna have to unmute yourself. Who's suing and why? That just kind of was sitting there like a lead balloon. So can you?
Yeah, look, we don't know, whether anyone will sue, and if someone does, who it will be. My best guess is that Project Sam will sue. They are led by a former ONDCP official who is a real prohibitionist. He thinks that marijuana is a gateway drug and it's addictive and dangerous. He has $6 million in the bank. We know that because he runs a nonprofit and that information is publicly available. We also know firsthand that he's hired Bill Barr, the former Attorney General under Donald Trump, to lead his public comment and litigation. And so, the signs are written on the wall. I just can't imagine a scenario by which he wouldn't sue, but, will he find someone who has standing to sue? I don't know. I don't know that he does himself. He's going to have to find someone else probably who will have standing, but, it will surprise me greatly if there isn't a lawsuit over this.
Okay, thank you for answering that question. All right, Gabe, you are up next. Gabe Parton Lee from Wild and Faith Anderson from New Project will tag team our next section.
Great.
Now we start to get to the nitty gritty of what changes for businesses. So thank you, Gabe.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and talk a little bit about this. I'm not going to be as articulate or as intelligent as Andrew and Elizabeth here, but happy to, jump right in and talk a little bit about what it means for us and what we see as it meaning for all state licensed businesses in the U.S. Like Andrew and Elizabeth said, this isn't from a federal level. This isn't a significant change. Ultimately, cannabis is still illegal for off-label use or for non-prescription use, and it's just ratcheted down in terms of enforcement risk. The DEA is much less likely to go after somebody for Schedule 3 drug trafficking than for Schedule 1 drug trafficking. But I think that the real benefit for those that are in the licensed businesses and in the licensed industry, and I think this goes to Erica's question, yes, we'll still be committing federal felonies, but we are really, we're really moving on the progress towards normalization, towards acceptance at the more local levels, and a ratcheting down of the controlled substances at the federal level should, with additional advocacy, continue to ratchet down any of the state level enforcements. There's a lot of opportunities for us to, continue to work on that side. And I think that that's important for us as the industry to really lead that charge. This industry was created first and foremost on the idea of compassionate care, and there were a lot of philanthropists that added to state ballot measures to try to get things passed. And we, as the industry, have the opportunity now to step up to really continue that fight and bring this towards a full legalization, normalization, and regulation structure. And we have that opportunity. For operational compliance purposes, I think that there's a lot of implications for Schedule 3, just on the pure basis that it's less of a it's acknowledged as less of a risk than most controlled or all controlled substances at Schedule 1 and 2, which is meth, fentanyl, cocaine. All of those things are going to be always trafficked at a higher risk tolerance than anything else. And at the state level, we should see some, hopefully, loosening up of how the systems and structures of cannabis legalization and licensing work. Where we have been for the last 12 years of cannabis legalization is based off of a now rescinded Cole memo. There were some specific recommendations and guidances put into place for state legal markets and how those need to be regulated to ensure some degree of operational safety, or at least operational compliance for state level programs. With this change in federal policy, there's an opportunity for a new Cole memo, or a second version of the Garland memo, or whatever it would be at this point, to address exactly what or how states should regulate cannabis. And I think that we've learned a lot in the last 12 years. There's, for our purposes, we're going to be focusing a lot on manufacturing and responsible advertising, to make sure that the products that we continue to produce are safe, and that they're that they don't contribute to any additional risk. We as an industry get to grow up a little bit and have an opportunity to to recognize that we need to have some degree of self-regulation for our responsible advertising. We need to have a degree of self-regulation for our manufacturing purposes. And I think that that's all likely to happen because we're going to have a little bit more flexibility without 280E on top of us. The biggest change for all state legal businesses, regardless of whether you're big, small, or anybody, is going to be the removal of 280E. That's going to help everybody get off their, get a little bit of a leg up, and, give some more opportunity for our organic funding, and open up opportunities for people to expand and increase their business, focus a little bit more on themselves instead of just really, living from paycheck to paycheck as a business. I'm going to let Faith talk about the specific implications a little bit more, but my challenge and what we're going to be focusing on, at least, is to make sure that we're using those savings responsibly to ensure that we're still marketing at in a responsible manner, not to change our model a little bit, but really to focus significantly more on ensuring the safety of our products, contributing towards the continued progress at state and federal levels for cannabis normalization, legalization, as well as just making sure that we are paying attention to the products that we're putting out and how we're marketing them. Is it different for ancillary businesses and brand partnerships? I think so. This isn't safe banking. It's not opening up banks for everybody, but everything in banking is based off of a risk algorithm, and lending to a business that's trafficking in controlled substances at a Schedule 1 is more risky than lending to businesses that are involved in Schedule 3 products. So I do think that just generally there will be a larger opportunity because this is steps towards normalization, and more people will be willing to take the risks to agree in or to work in the state level industries. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities, and we need to make sure that we're, using this opportunity in a way to continue to, prove that the cannabis industry is a real industry. We are creating products that people want and people, patients need, and continue to, be ready for what's to come next, because we want to preserve what this industry has built so far. Over the past 12 years, we've seen a lot of very disciplined operators succeeding, and we've seen a lot of folks struggling. And we need to make sure that, because of, the culture of this industry has been built around, been built a little bit differently than what we've seen in, other industries. And we have the opportunity to preserve that culture beyond what we've built so far, and use these 280E savings, use this opportunity as a springboard for more positive change at the federal and state levels. So
thank you, Gabe. Lots more work to be done. Let's talk about 280E changes for businesses. Let's get into the heart of what's going to change and what tax relief is going to look like, just frankly. So I'm turning it over to Faith Anderson. Faith.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so 280E, just right here on the screen, just in case everyone doesn't know, I'm just going to read this really quick so you understand what 280 is, and we'll go into detail some of the things that are likely to change if it should be rescheduled. So 280E of the IRS or Internal Revenue Code prohibits businesses involved in the trafficking of Schedule I or Schedule II controlled substances. Basically, it all of the deductions that most companies can deduct, like salaries, advertising, charity, donations, things like that, from their revenue are excluded from cannabis businesses because of 280E. This leads to extremely high tax rates, some as much as 70% of revenue. So that is 280E, and it will, regardless of how good you are, how successful you are, it makes a big impact on all cannabis businesses. Okay. So let's get into some of the things that will happen if this is rescheduled. So you can go to, let's go over these. Okay. So right now, deductibility of business expenses. Currently, cannabis businesses cannot deduct ordinary and necessary business expenses due to 280E. They can only deduct the costs of goods, which includes some direct production costs. After rescheduling, however, cannabis is rescheduled. When it's rescheduled to a lower classification or deschedule, businesses could potentially deduct all ordinary and necessary business expenses. This would align them with other legal businesses and significantly reduce their taxable income. Tax liability reduction. Again, currently, some companies have an effective tax rate of up to 70% or more, which is it's crippling. But after rescheduling, with the ability to deduct these expenses, tax liabilities for cannabis businesses would decrease dramatically. This would improve profitability and financial stability within the industry. Accounting practices, and this is near and dear to my heart, having created accounting, having to get a whole new education in accounting in order to build cannabis accounting departments. It would, right now, I suggest cannabis businesses to not entertain accountants or bookkeepers who don't have cannabis experience. I seriously promote that because they just don't know that they don't know. And it could lead to serious consequences when that company gets audited. If it gets rescheduled and we're more in line with traditional legal businesses, yeah, you could still get a bookkeeping, a poor bookkeeping penalty, but it won't be like like Andrew said, tax evasion. Let me just break that down a little bit for you. So bookkeeping error is, it should have been in COGS, but you put it in operating expenses. The IRS could be petty if they wanted to and say poor bookkeeping. Whereas right now, if you put it as a COG and it should be in an operating expense, which you pay taxes on, now you're evading taxes. And there's a lot, a lot more penalties and all those interest and penalties of taking back that deduction, then poor bookkeeping can shut a company down. So that's how I like to explain it. So the accounting process would be much easier. And even someone without cannabis experience should be able to run somebody's books or keep somebody's books. Investment and growth. Currently, high tax rates and complex accounting deter investment in the cannabis industries. Investors may be wary of financial instability caused by Section 280E's constraints. After rescheduling, lower effective tax rates and simpler accounting would make the cannabis industry more attractive to investors. This could lead to increased investment, expansion, and growth within the sector. And lastly, audit and compliance. Right now, I tell all cannabis businesses, it's not really if you're going to get audited. It's when, and that's so important because the when is what can get you in trouble. Right now, because you've been operating for a year or 2 or 3 or even 4 years, and you're using a regular bookkeeper and someone who doesn't have experience in your taxes or your books, and you think everything is okay, but they come and get you in year 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and they'll audit all those years. Right. And then they'll hit you, they'll take all those deductions away, hit you with the poor bookkeeping, all kinds of interest and penalties, and it will close you down. So with it being rescheduled and it starting to be, normalized in cannabis industry, because they know these people aren't doing the accounting right, you'll be less of a target. And so it'll go back to if. It'll go back to the regular red flags of if you get audited, not when. Right now, it's definitely when is it going to happen. Yeah. So this is just a brief representation of right now, retail is the worst, right? So retail, all that they can deduct is the necessary cost to get the product to them, and that's it, to acquire the product. They're hit really hard. It's hard for them to function. They are the epitome of basically living paycheck to paycheck because of 280E. Cultivation and manufacturing, they have, because of the BOM, all of the things that go into creating the product, they have a little bit more wiggle room and including inventorial costs and having that relay over to COGS, which lessens their tax burden, but still the same. They still have these restrictions of 280E, and this is just a brief visualization of how it is right now. Okay. So going along with 280E is, I don't know if you guys are aware, but if you could just scroll down to the cheat sheet of how cultivation and retail and manufacturers of cannabis, this is how they have to value their inventory and the costs that they can include in their inventory. So cultivation, processing, food, manufacturing will all go by CFR 26471-11, and retail would be 471-3. Okay. And okay, so what would rescheduling do to these sections? You can, I think, go back up to this one right here. So you would, how am I doing one time? Jeanette?
5 more minutes.
Okay, so inclusion of costs, inclusion of more costs, that is self-explanatory. You can absolutely see how if you can include more costs like state and local property taxes, insurance costs, employee benefits, all employee salaries. Right now, you're able to include the bud tenders, people who are hands-on touching the product, but admin costs are not included in your building, lunch rooms, rooms that don't house the cannabis have to be excluded from the square footage of the rent that can go into COGS. So with inclusion of more costs, that comes all the way down to that gives you that savings, that cash flow savings that Gabe is talking about. You can deduct more of these. You won't pay as much in taxes. For the alignment with general manufacturing rules, if it's rescheduled, cannabis companies would be able to align their inventory processes and inventory accounting processes with more of with legal businesses. And it would simplify compliance and reduce discrepancies should they get audited, because right now, when cannabis the way that they keep their books is totally different. Unless they have an experienced accounting department or experienced accounting, they're going to keep their books like a regular accounting. And then the CPA, the tax person, is going to have to go, to me, jump through a whole bunch of hoops to get it to be 280E compliant. The way that I did it and the way that I encourage people to do is have that experienced bookkeeper or accountant right there, so that the CPA who's charging $250 to $300 an hour will have less work to get your books from GAAP to tax, from just regular financial accounting to tax, which includes the 280E. So yeah, when we're able to align with regular legal businesses, it'll make it less tedious. Number 3, expanded inclusions and exclusions. It's basically, the same thing. With it being rescheduled, indirect production costs may be included, such as repair expenses, maintenance, utilities, marketing, marketing and advertising, interest expense. They may still all be excluded, but the regulatory burden might lessen because of the getting rid of the 280E. You can go to the next screen. And this is, again, it's really more, I wanted to get into, I have more details into these, but if anybody wants them, I can send them out to you. But again, this is for retail. Basically, these are going to be the 2 things that help retail in their inventory. Right now, the 471-3 dictates how inventory should be valued, typically at cost, which basically only includes the purchase price and necessary expenses to acquire the goods. That's it. After rescheduling, cannabis businesses may be allowed to adopt more straightforward inventory valuation methods, reducing complexity and compliance costs. And the flexibility and cost allocation really just goes into it, again, relaxing the constraints, allowing more flexibility and allocating overhead and indirect costs, which would directly affect their taxable income rate. So overall, these are the practical implications for cannabis businesses. A major tax reduction, again, which is, right now it is crippling a lot outside of not being able to get funding. The tax consequences of running a cannabis business is crippling a lot of businesses. So we can look to see everybody's bottom line improve on that. Relaxed accounting practices. You should be able to go right out and get a regular bookkeeper or accountant to help you out. And the most important to me is the audit risk. It won't, unless you're just extremely careless. You shouldn't be getting in a situation where if you get audited, you will absolutely get shut down. And yeah.
Okay.
I did want to address one question, I believe, from Erica in regards to how can, even though it'll be federally still illegal, how can it help? It can help, again, just because of the 280E, right? So you shouldn't be, it should help your bottom line. It should allow you more money to put back into the business instead of into taxes. And this is going to be a really shameless plug, but all of the big businesses out here, New Project is here willing to lend to cannabis businesses. When this rescheduling happens, the charity and donations should be able to be deducted. So that'll allow you to freely give to us so we can give back to the community.
The other thing I'll say is a shameless plug very fast before we turn over to Frederica and MCBA. That additional, when Faith talked about the additional cash and Gabe mentioned the cash flow, think about for yourself, and this is just a plug for our technical assistance services in terms of finance and your cash flow. That opening up more cash, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to use that to grow your business? I would start thinking about that now. How much money did you pay, the government and taxes, and what would that look like if you invested it into this growth project or that growth project for your business? And having a better handle on your cash will give you more opportunity to that money doesn't slip between your fingers, if you will. When you know where every penny is going and what it's accounted for and when it's coming in, you can control it better to grow your business. So say that about using our technical assistance services as well. And then Frederica Easley from Minority Cannabis Business Association is going to bring another set of important messages and lens for us on this. Thank you, Frederica.
Awesome. So thank you for having me, Jeanette. So Frederica McCleary Easley, Vice President of MCBA, Executive Director of the Cannabis Impact Fund, former Director of Strategic Initiatives for the People's Ecosystem, cannabis company owned and operated by 3 women in our C-suite, that successfully transferred from legacy into the regulated space, started in retail, and because of all of the things that Faith laid out for us in terms of retail, really getting the short end of the stick, transitioned into brand management, manufacturing, and distribution. And so it is a pleasure to be here. So
and can I just interrupt, Frederica? And one of the
yes, ma'am.
Very first loan we made, one of the 3, was to the people of the system, their Portland, Oregon retail store, the retail store you're talking about. So there's a definite kind of ecosystem being built and important perspectives. Thank you for sharing, because you've got a good history on these businesses and how they ebb and flow.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for bringing that all around. So a couple of points I wanted to just really lay out. This is you know, the ultimate goal here is to free the plant and to free people, right? There are people who are still serving time while others are making money off of the business of this plant. And so ultimately, we want to do this. I think Andrew did a great job earlier of laying out what our two pathways to that are. And so I like football. I like to use a football analogy that, you know, sometimes you get a Hail Mary, right? And you're able to run it into the end goal, into end zone and score that touchdown. But most times in football, what happens are first down, right? And so the importance of first downs is that it keeps inching you forward. It keeps moving you forward to that ultimate goal. And so this is the position that cannabis is in right now, right? Like cannabis needed a win. We have spent years going back and forth in terms of, you know, the Senate versus the House, for the MORE Act, for safe banking, for all of these things. And so really, as we fight to normalize this plant, as we fight to, you know, essentially free it and free people and fully legalize it, like not have it on any of our controlled substance lists, we have to make sure that we are moving the ball forward. And so a couple of things that I want to just kind of like offer to level set. You see it on here, but I would like briefly read it and add a little bit of comments. So in 2022, under 280E, state legal cannabis companies paid more than 1.8 billion in excess taxes. Okay, let that sit with you for a minute, because this is exactly what Jeanette and Vic were just talking about in terms of that money. What would you do if you had all of that money that you had to pay at 70%, at 80%, whatever the cost may have been? What would you be able to do for yourself and for your business? You would be able to reinvest. And so right now, especially many minority cannabis owned businesses are stuck in situations where they are having to accept predatory deals. We know that the VC landscape is very limited. We know what those percentages are. About 2% go to minorities. That's not even in cannabis. Like that's just in general in terms of VC, home offices, you know, angel investors. Now, when you bring it into cannabis, we are talking even less percentages, right? So you are, a lot of business owners are stuck into the position where they're having to deal with predatory deals where people, of course, want equity in their company. So imagine if you're able to keep more of your generated revenue, so you don't have to go out to that VC. You don't have to go to that family fund. You don't have to accept those, you know, those percentages and those amounts that they're offering you. In addition to that, because you're able to keep more of your money, guess what? The evaluation of your company changes, right? Because, you know, you're in a different position now in terms of you quickly being able to get into the black from the red in terms of, you know, what you're bringing in, your profit versus your losses, okay? Second thing, in 2024, the Forbes report showed that the legal cannabis industry employs almost 500,000 people. So we see our politicians all over the place talking about unemployment rates, right? Talking about, you know, making sure that people are working, making sure that people are, you know, putting into our system. We know, I'll say for me, I don't believe that there will be a retirement system, you know, by the time that I'm ready to you know, come out of this rat race. And so, but this helps, right? The fact that the cannabis industry employs already in this limited regulated space, right? That it employs so many, that is very important, right? And then the third thing I'll just kind of present is, you know, we saw this during COVID, right? We saw this during COVID that cannabis businesses were deemed essential, right? They were allowed to stay open. There were different business practices that were fast-lined in terms of being able to have drive-up services, being able to have hands-free delivery, delivery in general. There were states that, you know, may not have had that as an initial license type, but they quickly expanded. And a part of them doing that was because during COVID, many states' coffers were decimated. This was a global issue, and there's something that no one had planned for, right? And so I want to present all of those things because going back to what Andrew and Elizabeth shared, this is why data matters, right? Because as Andrew stated earlier, there was a petition in 2016 to move the FDA and DEA into rescheduling or descheduling cannabis. And at the time they said, oh, we don't have the data. The key difference between then and now is that, oh, we have data. And so you saw when the DEA released their findings, they said it was something like 38,000 medical professionals, you know, they found that they were actually using the plant in healing practices. So if we can skip to the next slide. So these are questions that I'm thinking about and I wanted to present here on the webinar in terms of, what can you do, right? So community, I'm going to ask you, what are you advocating for? Okay. If you are not at the table, then you are on the menu. And so in terms of businesses being in urban environments, being in communities that were negatively impacted by the successful war on drugs, what are you advocating for? How are you making sure that because we're really pushing a point on 280E relief, and we're pushing the point on it being easier for research to be done, that some of those limitations that were in place from the DEA for those to be relaxed a bit. And so what are you pushing for? I would encourage you to push to make sure that there are community engagement and investment programs and policies for these businesses that are in your community. I would push especially for our HBCUs and our colleges and institutions. In terms of research, we want to make sure that we have a balanced research environment, right? We want to make sure that we have some diversity in terms of who's doing the research, who are the subjects, what is the purpose of it? Because there's a ton of research out here, but if we're being honest, most of it has been geared into looking for ways in which cannabis is harmful, that there is that potential for abuse, right? And if we're going to be real here, let's please just be real. There is the potential for abuse for everything. You can abuse water, you can abuse sugar, you can abuse shopping, you can abuse anything, okay? And that's not to lessen, the impact that it can have. But I also want to make sure that we are really operating from a place of not fear, but a place of fact as we are moving forward, with these efforts to free the plant, free the people. Business owners, are you educating your community members, right? I have friends, and 9 times out of 10, they don't know the difference, and I have to educate them on a regulated business, a regulated retail versus just these pop-ups and things of that nature. They may not know the difference between Delta 8 and Delta 9. They may not know the difference between, and all of those things are important, again, as we're moving to normalize the plant and to ultimately free it. There is a responsibility of the community, there's responsibility of business owners, all stakeholders, right? And the reason why this is important is, again, because data matters. And so we're in an election year right now, right? And people keep referring to what, President Biden and VP Harris promised, which got them, elected, got them in office for these 4 years. We're in a position now to make sure that we are holding our elected officials, especially at local and state levels, because that is where things are moving more rapidly. We're in a position to hold them accountable. I tell people at the federal level, shit can take years to move, as we've seen, but at your local and state level, people can make a decision today that you can feel tomorrow. And so in your chat, I believe that there are two links that would have been shared. So the first one I see right now is biz conditions, right? So these are both of the links that are going to be shared in terms of surveys are ones that MCBA is partnered with, along with a number of other organizations, specifically on business conditions. It is MCBA working with ATACH, which is the American Trade Association for Cannabis, as well as CCSR, Cannabis Scheduling and Reform. And so this effort is to make sure that we are quantifying the economic impact of rescheduling for 280E reform on small businesses and minority-owned cannabis companies, right? So that's the first one. The second link, I think, Faith, you have the second one, but that one is going to be a debt survey. If you don't have it, I'll plug it in real quick, but it's going to be a debt survey. And so the purpose of this debt survey is to get enough data to show the total amount of financing that is being required right now in the cannabis industry so that we can project for the next 5 to 10 years. So I think someone put in the chat in terms of, how does this impact banking and things of that nature, and loans and credit lines and things of that nature? Well, data matters, right? And so what we're trying to do is make sure that we have the data that can be presented to incentivize them to start lending and to lend as we're normalizing, right? To lend at more reasonable rates. The more lenders that there are in cannabis, the then interest rates will go down, and Congress will be forced to continue to recognize the impact that cannabis is having on this, on our country in general, and banking policy reform, right? It will help to actually push to make banking policy reform a priority. I'm gonna stop there because I see that we're actually at time. I hope I was succinct enough and gave you all food for thought. But please participate. Again, data matters as we're on this road of normalizing the freeing people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's address the banking question right up front, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. And if you can't stay with us, they will be recorded. So if you have to run, but if you can stay, we'll just go a little longer. So Andrew, Elizabeth, does anyone want to speak to banking? And there's some people are in an assumption camp that they can walk into a Wells Fargo, and that's not what's going to happen when we hit Schedule 3. So can you just describe what is most likely to happen?
I can take that one.
Okay.
I don't no. I mean, there's no safe banking here. There's no change in insurance. But all of these are negotiable points. I put it in the chat. There, banks and insurance companies really look at two things when they're assessing whether to open an account for a cannabis business. It's, are you operating in a federally illegal business? Yes. Are you a financially viable business? Sometimes yes. In both events, rescheduling provides an opportunity to change that calculus and gives us a reason to work with more credit unions, work with more banks. There are regulated banks that are entering this sector, and they've been waiting for any sort of dial down of the risk tolerance here. And I think that this is an opportunity. It's not safe banking. It's not going to immediately open things up. And even safe banking wouldn't immediately open things up because there's still financially, a lot of financially unviable businesses out there in cannabis. And, banks are paying attention to that. Insurance companies are paying attention to that. And the benefits of 280E are going to very, very beneficially help the negotiation and the conversations that you're having with your insurance company, with your bank, to ease off some of those excess cannabis taxes that you guys know about, that every single item that you buy is a little bit more expensive because you're in cannabis. Every piece of insurance is a little bit worse because you're in cannabis. The loans are worse. All of those things that, we as operators have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. We actually have some leverage and some opportunity to push back and point to the progress of the federal government, to point that no licensed entity has ever been enforced on by the federal government for operating in accordance with the federal or with the state level regulations. So we continue to have this sort of progress to actually arm ourselves to move forward in those conversations a little bit more.
Okay, we are informal here. So if you have a question, just unmute yourself and ask. Unmute yourself and ask away. And if you would introduce yourself, that would be awesome. Much appreciated.
And I did want to point out, like, to what Gabe said. I know that the banking is going to be exactly as he said, but don't forget there are money rules, right? Money runs everything, and there are going to be those banks who have been waiting for a little bit of movement, who are going to try to capitalize. They're going to do it. And if they're near you, you're going to be great. If they're not, then you're going to be in the same position. But there are going to be some banks who are going to relax their standards to monopolize on the industry.
And I also want to just add to that, because there are these arguments out there that says, well, the MSOs are going to be able to take advantage of this. And listen, there isn't a policy that can be passed that would eliminate them, that would give just one group access and the other not, right? And so the reality is that most of them already have access to capital, right? Will they take advantage of it? Of course, everyone is going to take advantage of it, but that is like what my great grandma used to say, like, spiting your hand to wash your face or something of that nature. It's like, look, you can't eliminate one thing. So do you want to struggle even more to try to eliminate, a possibility or opportunity for someone else, right? At the end of the day, what we should be fighting for is for there to be relaxed access And then to deal with some of those systemic issues, those racial bias issues that are already embedded in our financial institutions, to make sure that there are some teeth and there's some accountability into monitoring how financing is being handled. So as it's being relaxed, someone needs to be monitoring the banking system to say, well, how many small businesses are you lending to? And what kind of interest rates are you giving them versus some of these other ones? Like what is your criteria? How are you analyzing the readiness, or to Gabe's point, you being an affluent business? So those are the things that we need to focus on. This idea of focusing on aspects that we really can't control or we really can't limit, in my personal opinion, is futile.
So I think there's two definitions of big business, and I'm going to let Gabe respond, but I want to do this distinction. So there will be big businesses, let's assume pharma, and there's already pharma today, who have cannabis or cannabis derivative products. Those businesses that are going to, have already got the kind of credentialing and systems in place are one set of businesses who will have an opportunity. And then there are MSOs, so if we'll just use that terminology, multiple state organizations, I forgot what that acronym even stood for, but there are the licenses in multiple states, which Wild is one. How many states, Gabe? So I'd like you to speak to the reality of is there some big candy shop opening up for your guys, your size? Speak to it, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a couple ways to address this, because I know that MSOs is a bad word in most all contexts, and I think it's fair. I think there are a lot of irresponsible folks that have flaunted the rules, and because they are well funded, they're able to pay their way out of any sort of fines, penalties, anything like that. That's just the truth. And unfortunately, this is they're the loudest. They have been the most successful, and they're already public in the Canadian markets. There's, I hate, to break it down to as simple as it is, but unfortunately, any sort of progress or legalization in cannabis isn't going to change capitalism in America. And there are, with this system, unfortunately, a lot of winners and losers. Well, few winners and a lot of losers. However, to put a positive spin on that, not everybody gets to be a billionaire. Not everybody gets to be a millionaire. People get to have successful businesses, and people get to have successful opportunities. And the point of running a business is different for everybody. For us, we're focused on, some very specific goals in mind for Wild. And one of those goals was reinvesting in the community and ending the war on drugs and fixing, trying to fix folks' pasts that, that are screwed over. When I started with Wild 6 years ago, it was 1 month in, and we made our first $1 million in sales in a month. And it was incredible. Everybody was so excited. And it took 1 second for us to remember that there are people that are still serving time for selling an ounce. It's a ridiculous standard that we have set ourselves up for. And so, if we're looking at what we as businesses can do and what we have the opportunity to do, we have that opportunity to use use these savings to continue to reinvest in our communities, to continue on our goals. I can't speak for everybody, and I don't want to speak for everyone. I think that there's a huge opportunity for us as large operators, as small operators, to really focus on on what matters and what matters to this industry, and not forget where this industry came from, and that we've had 2 generations of inflicting of disproportionately impacted criminal justice on different folks. So, for me, it matters a lot that we have this opportunity to use to continue fueling progress at the federal and state levels. And if you're worried about pharmaceuticals, they're already here. They have invested in cannabis businesses. They haven't been investing in hemp businesses. They have been investing in a lot of these cannabinoid businesses. And I'm not saying turn over and accept it. I'm saying that you get to focus on yourself and you focus on the discipline that you bring to your business and the purpose of your work, of your business. If you have the opportunity to affect change where you are, do it. This gives you more of an opportunity to do that. And, you know, for our purposes, yeah, it's, you know, you know, it's often framed as a descheduling or bust, or rescheduling is the only way, or, you know, prohibition forever. And I think that those, you know, that rescheduling is the only way right now, because descheduling or bust is the only way. We have to look towards, you know, we have to use this as the only step that's available for us to move forward to really descheduling. And that's, you know, that's been my opinion on this, is that we, you know, this is the step that creates the opportunity in Congress where there is a vacuum to fill, and it gives an opportunity for us to actually make, you know, make progress at the federal level, because we've been trying for the last 12 years and nothing has happened.
Okay, thank you, Gabe. I'm going to remind the folks, this isn't a for or against. Sorry, I appreciate you, Gabe. And I appreciate your opinion. And would like to get to another question we've got in the chat. There was a timeline up front, but the question is very simply posed, so this will be an easy answer. When is this actually going to happen? Easy answer meaning you don't have a crystal ball, but can you give us a good short answer on that, Elizabeth?
Yeah, so I mean, the process is kicked off, right? We're in the comment period, July 22nd, that period closes. Later this month, we're going to find out, or early next month, whether or not an ALJ hearing is going to be granted, which gives us some more clarity on our timeline. But what we tried to outline in the slides that I think will be shared afterwards too is there is a path for this to be done before November, and we are all pushing as hard as possible. Filling out things like those surveys that were in the link are incredibly helpful in this process as well. The more data we contribute, the more, you know, substantive comments that are submitted, the more progress we'll make here. But that's really the timeline we're looking at, is now through you know, end of October.
Okay, thank you. Any more?
But I don't have a crystal ball.
No.
So yeah.
Thank you for the succinct answer. Any more questions anyone wants to ask in the chat, or unmute yourself before I close us?
Really quick, sorry. Hi, I'm Raquel. So good to see everybody here. So I was reading yesterday that Cape Cod, I mean, I was watching the news. Cape Cod is having issues with being able to sell their products. So they are like filing something or doing something to where they're able to, so that they would be able to ship product like overseas and stuff. Do we see that possibly happening?
Great question.
I think you're talking about the Martha's Vineyard item, right? So folks in Massachusetts that have been trying to get product out
Maybe.
from Martha's Vineyard. Apparently Martha's Vineyard's an island. I haven't been there before, but it is an island off the coast of Massachusetts. And there have been states that have dealt with this. Alaska, California, with the Catalina Islands, have been able to do in-state transfers of product either by plane or by boat. As long as it's identified on the manifest and all that stuff. I think this is a, you know, sort of regulatory issue that Massachusetts is dealing with. And I know that there's like the lawsuit that's being filed is like on a friendly basis, but yeah, in terms of in-state across, you know, US waters, that's possible.
It made me think of the question that has been asked a lot around this is, does this change anything for interstate commerce or for international? No. Okay, so that was great. Thank you for that. Any other questions? When Gabe said no, if you're not looking at your screen, he just shook his head to the side. No.
Yeah, at this point, no, it creates the conversation, creates an environment for more conversations on interstate commerce, but all of that has to be approved at the federal level, either through an interstate commerce or compact or something else.
Okay, wonderful. So that is a good place to move and close, because that leaves us with the action steps. What's going to happen next is you are in that comment period. So right now, start making your helpful comments. Andrew gave some examples of some things that would be really helpful. Frederica did as well. So, what are those comments you might want to make make right now? It's just incumbent upon us as the cannabis community to be contributing to these comments. So I highly recommend you make comments. And then the other thing is the activism at your state level continues to be the most important thing you can do right now. These states are going to, thank you, Raquel. These states are going to set the standard for what the feds follow. So if you've got a great state system, that's only going to show that cannabis works and that here is a model that's working. And I believe it's really important in this moment, Gabe said that cannabis isn't going to change capitalism in America. And I think that's true with one shining opportunity. We have seen states break off these cannabis taxes and invest them in the communities most harmed by the war on drugs, and it has been game changing. In Illinois, it will be game changing. In New York, it's going to come because they broke off a significant amount. In Portland, the amount that we have is small, but it is game changing for the businesses it touches. Same with Colorado, something is better than nothing. So this is a critical moment to make that a standard where we are doing reparative justice work. And Illinois is a gold standard because they use that language. They called it what it is. It's reparative justice for the economic drain that cannabis criminalization was a significant part of the criminal justice system and the war on drugs and how it worked and how it drained that wealth. So that this opportunity to make these investments, and I'm going to quote Kat Packer, who was on, I don't know if Kat's still with us, but Kat called this the starting point, not the end. You could say for or against, but once it happens, it's the starting point. And we need to grab this ball and run because we are all the cannabis industry. And Erica, your points are super valid. And I would say that you have always got a consumer base as these cannabis businesses who are authentically grown from the industry, from the culture, from the consumers. You're always going to be heads and tails be ahead of some big business that's pulling together a marketing team to think about it. So just know that you have like this moment in time to keep running and keep doing your work locally because, the opportunity is there and this is just the start. So that's it. We're closed out. If no more questions, the recording is going to be shared with every registrant. So you'll have this with all the, Faith's masterclass on 280E and cannabis accounting. That was super helpful. So yeah, wonderful. Look for that. And thank you for your time today.
Yeah.
Thank you to Wild. Thank you to the Coalition for Cannabis Scheduling Reform.
Thank you guys.
Thank you to all of these businesses for joining us. And I just want to shout Wild out before they go to say that, when Gabe says those other businesses are doing it wrong and we're doing it right, they do put their money where their mouth is. We're not making a big noise about it, but they gave us $500,000 as a start for a loan fund for Black businesses as the priority. And, that needs to keep happening in a moment in time when it's being struck down by the Fed. So, cannabis can do its work to do the right thing. And we appreciate Wild for that. And Jonathan Ross, who's on, who runs their community affairs team. So thank you guys.
And we want more people to do it.
That's right.
We're not the only ones
Wild,
doing it, but we want more people to do it.
Wild did this hoping that it would set a standard. So, this is it's just a moment in time, everyone. And we're going to leverage the spotlight on cannabis while it's on it to get some work done.
And if anybody wants the details, the PDF for the bullet points that I went over, the details of it on screen, if anybody would like that, please just email me and I'll get that over to you.
Okay, so I'm going to drop some contact information in the chat and then we are done. Thank you, everyone.
Have a great
Thank
day.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Yeah, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, hold on. Before we close the meeting, let me just copy this because I know it'll take it away from me. Oh, wait. Okay, now I got two. All right, wait. I'm going to copy both. Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you guys so
Thank you.
much. God bless. Have a good one.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
I'm so tempted to say hello. Are you guys listening? I love when people are still hanging on at the end of a webinar. I've never met Joe in person, but Joe's from Georgia. And I'm gonna text Saze right now and say, hey. Okay, bye.
Bye.